So, I mean, I'm excited about talking with you tonight. You know, when I first started, I don't know who led me to you. I think Seth Detling is who provided me your name. But when I first started trying to get into influencing and starting the YouTube thing, I believe it was Seth that told me to reach out to you. It was either him or Lee from Bourbon Departed. And I mean, I reached out to you and you immediately reached right back out to me. And then just as transparent as you could be with, you know, hey, man, this is kind of like what to expect. Here's some ideas of things you can do. Here's some places that I've succeeded, some places that I've made mistakes. And I just can't thank you enough for that. So, you know, I'm a huge fan just because of that. But little did I know that you were going to start a great whiskey brand. So that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight.
Yeah, a lot of people helped me along the way. Fred Minnick was help early on, and the Bourbon Bourbon Pursuit. They were a big inspiration of mine, and I learned, pretty quickly that if you reach out, everybody in the community seems to be pretty, open to the idea of working together and, kind of common cause mentality. And so it's a little bit embarrassing because I get a couple of calls a week from people who are either content creators or thinking about creating content, or people who are wanting to start a brand and they want to pick my brain. And I don't turn down any of the opportunities to talk to somebody because it's a passion of mine and people help me and I want to help other people as much as I can. But that also means I don't catalog it all. So sometimes people reach back out to me and they're like, hey, you sent me all this information about starting my own group and we just hit 1,000 people and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, awesome. But
Who are you?
I talked to 10 people who didn't do anything, and I, don't necessarily, catalog all that stuff. But I'm happy to see anyone coming in and kind of building the whiskey enthusiast community, because I believe it's so much more than just drinking alcohol. And so anybody that's willing to join the cause, I want to see them be successful,
Well, and the thing that you talk about at the end of most of your videos as to why you did it, that's a lot of the reason why I did it. Not exactly the same, right? But it brings so many people together, and it's for one thing, and it's aside from everything else: politics, religion, work, bad days, whatever. Heather and I were watching a few Netflix documentaries, and one of them, the guy was talking about going to get his bottle. They were having a bottle share that night, and it just kind of showed the people coming in, and they kind of interviewed individual people. This guy had a bad day, this girl just lost her dog, whatever. But for that hour or whatever time they were together, the world just kind of slowed down and stopped, and they got to enjoy life. And it was because whiskey brought them together, right?
Right. No, I mean, and that's really, really what it's all about. I mean, it's why it's irritating when I see people putting too much emphasis on what someone else drinks or what they think about this or that, or, whatever. It's like, bro, I could spend all day supporting your idea of what is the best. And I could also spend an equal amount of time destroying you for thinking that this is the only thing that's good. And so could a lot of other people. That's not what this is about, right? Like,
no, not at all.
It's really about people and connection and community and opportunities to, get to know each other and network and make new connections and form new relationships. And so that's really what I try to focus on, and then just kind of drink what you like,
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you like it, that's fine. It's like Errol. I see him on, and he really likes Traveler whiskey. He hates it. I don't judge you because he hates it. I probably don't like it as well either. But no, when people are like, what is the proper way to drink whiskey? You bought it, drink it how you like. If you want to put Coke right in it, so be it. I like to drink mine neat, and that's just me. But
I try to put some caveats on that, just because there's ways that you can drink your whiskey that destroy community. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like if you're mixing like Pappy 23 with diet soda, you're probably not doing that because that's how you like your whiskey. You're probably doing it to flex and to piss people off. And so I try to discourage that kind of behavior. But, I mean, I don't drink whiskey all the time. I've been on a tequila tear like no one's business. Right. And, my wife makes a lot of cocktails and we enjoy cocktails as well. So, sometimes in the summer, I don't want to drink cask strength whiskey neat, and I'll drink it on rocks, and it's just whatever suits your fancy. It's really just about enjoying yourself and the people that you're drinking with.
Sure. Give me 1 second. My daughter just got to the front door. She didn't have a key. I bet I've cut 25 keys and she doesn't have one. So
no worries. I'll keep the people company. So while Brandon's gone, I don't know if you all know what my platform's all about, but it is all about community and connection. And I have this theory that spirits were originally created, whiskey in particular. So beer was created to preserve caloric resources from grains that were not going to last long enough for someone to consume them. And whiskey was created to preserve the caloric resources of beer that wasn't going to last long enough. And since it's really about preserving calories for society, I feel like even if you're chintzy and generally miserly, there's this weird thing about spirits that make you want to share it with other people because somewhere in your brain, it's a communal resource. And that's what I'm all about, is using that communal resource to help bring people together. All right, sorry.
That's one of the things I really like. Yeah, I had my earpiece in, so I heard your talking, and that's exactly right. And that's one of the things that drew me to you when I started watching your channel, because it's exactly the way I feel about it. If I go out and buy a bottle, it's to be opened and it's to be drank and it's to be shared with others. And I don't mind sending you samples. I don't mind bringing you samples, and I don't mind having you over to sample anything I have, because there again, it goes back to what it's really all about. And I just think it's a beautiful thing.
These are my samples.
Those are right.
That are sitting on my bar top, because that's how frequently I send out samples. When I get one, they're in big boxes because I buy so many at a time.
Right. And that's what it's all about. And you've drawn a great community by doing that, right? And people get to learn about different things. And I mean, you really dig into all of the history and the facts on everything. So, I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge. But I'd really like to talk about the Prideful Goat and how you guys got to it. This 12 years is absolutely delicious. And I don't know how you, one, source it, and two, put it on the shelf and I can find it for $45-$50. Like, that doesn't add up. And it's absolutely amazing.
It's the old adage, it's better to be lucky than good. It certainly plays into the history of the Prideful Goat. So you mentioned the 15-year, and the backstory was it was December, I think, 18th, 2019. I went to a distillery event at Giant Texas Distillers. Giant Texas Distillers is the largest distillery west of the Mississippi. No one knows what it is, but Carlos de Aldecoa, who is best described as an international coffee baron. He and his family are third generation, and they are wholesalers of coffee all around the world. About 30 to 40% of the coffee that enters the United States passes through Carlos's hands before it makes it to a consumer.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a big enterprise, right?
Yeah.
His decaffeination plant makes all the caffeine for Coca-Cola. His customers are Starbucks and Maxwell House and all that stuff.
Wow.
And he started a distillery, and I went down there for an event that the Texas Whiskey Association was putting on at their distillery. I met Carlos. He turned out to be this really awesome, super personable guy, very approachable, no, pretentious air about him, which is what you would expect from somebody in his position in life. And
Sure.
I mean, he occasionally says things that let you know he doesn't realize he's doing it, but occasionally he says something that lets you know like what level he's on. Like one time he invited me to go to a barrel cooperage that they were negotiating a contract with to bulk purchase new barrels. And I said I wanted to go. And then he said, "What's the nearest airport to your house?" Because he was going to bring the plane to me.
Bring the plane to you.
Right. But at the same
but
time,
he didn't mean anything by that. Surely he just was offering you a great service.
No, he was just going to come pick me up. But I'm just saying, like, to talk to somebody that is like that, but still totally approachable, completely, friendly, throws in a little colorful language every so often. He's not like trying to put up airs and all that. He's just a great guy. And he let me try a 15-year Kentucky straight bourbon that he had when I went to that distillery event. And I thought it was great. And I also run the Facebook-based whiskey club called Someone Say Whiskey. And, we're always looking for good single barrels and things to bring to the community. And I found out what the distillery was, which I won't say here because the distillery has an NDA. But if you search the, Prideful Goat 15-year and you say who makes it, there's a debate. There's two main suspects that everyone says that it is. One is Jim Beam and one is Heaven Hill. And one of those is right. And I don't say which one it is, but because it was a major Kentucky distillery and there were some other factors that made it kind of an interesting opportunity, I asked for a single barrel for my club. And we found out that the 15-year didn't get shipped in barrels because the producer didn't want their barrels in somebody else's warehouse. And so they dumped the barrels into shipping containers, and each container was 330 gallons. And
just stainless steel totes, basically.
No, they're like Lexan or whatever. They're like, they look like plastic.
I know what you're talking about. Okay.
Most people have seen them. They usually have like a aluminum cage that goes around them. It's like they're about, I don't know, 4 feet tall and whatever.
Right.
But yeah, they were shipped in those, and they were like, you can still pick a tote if you want, but instead of picking one barrel, it's going to be about 1,300 bottles. And so I didn't think that my whiskey club, we have 16,000 members now, but at the time we just had over 1,000. And I thought, I don't think everybody in this club is going to buy a bottle of this. I don't care how good it is. And so I called a buddy of mine that lived in South Texas, Christopher Hart, that at the time was running a popular podcast called Whiskey Neat. And he ran a whiskey group down there called Houston Bourbon Society. He also founded the Houston Whiskey Social. And I told him about the opportunity. And I said, what if we split one of these totes and we, split it up between Dallas and Houston? And he came up with the idea of creating a new label for it, just for fun, right? Because what's cooler than a tater sticker? Designing your own label, basically. Sure. And so we went to Carlos. Carlos greenlit the project. We got to pick the name. The name doesn't mean anything. The backstory on that was I asked him, I told him, I said, I'm not very creative. So what would you recommend is like kind of direction? And he said, I want the whiskey label to look like an old world Irish pub sign.
Okay.
And so I started doing research and I came up with a name that was Gaelic. And I presented that as an idea to him. But the name was his last name and my last name in Gaelic. And he goes, hey, what do you think people are going to do when they find out that we named this whiskey after us? And he was like, I think they're gonna fucking crucify us. Like, you're not
Yeah.
gonna like that. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And then he just throws out, like, what about the Prideful Goat? And I was like, what about you've been on a hipster word generator? Like, what are you talking about? Like, the Prideful Goat. And he's like, it
Right.
sounds cool, right? And I was like, yeah, it sounds pretty cool. And he's like, think about like the label we could make with a goat. And, you know, it looked like an Irish pub sign. And I was like, yeah, sounds cool. And so really we just thought the name sounded cool. He claims he didn't use a generator to create the name. He claims he just came up with it. But we were able to create the label. Our print company submitted our label to a print competition, and we won the #1 consumer package design in the world that year.
Oh,
And
wow. That's
yeah,
awesome.
it was like such a big this print company, like you can't even imagine the number of words they have. They print for everyone. They print the BTAC labels. They print for everyone. And when you go in there, you have to be scanned in, and there's this thing that like reads your face and it checks your temperature, make sure you're not sick, and they take
Oh,
your
wow.
phone from you because you can't have a phone while you're walking around because they've got like new products that haven't been released out that their labels are being made. Like this place is harder to get into than like Fort Knox, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
the guy that runs all that was very excited, and he said it's basically like winning an Oscar for what he does, right?
That's awesome.
And so anyway, so we did all that, but we had released that 15-year, the 1,300 bottles for our first release, and it sold out in about 3 hours. And the distillery had never sold 1,300 bottles in 3 hours before. And so they said, hey,
That's awesome.
can you do it again? And so they gave us a second 1,300 bottle batch, and that sold out in about 45 minutes. And
No
then
kidding.
Carlos called and was like, hey, let's build this into a brand. And so at that point, I got given, Christopher and I were given permission to go out and look for a liquid that we thought was a good representation of the brand. And a lot of people want to know why we have so many rye whiskeys. And it's simply because it's a whole lot easier to find rye whiskey that we can release at a price that's not completely outrageous, that still has a good age statement at a good, proof point,
Right.
than it is to find bourbon. But I did fly to San Francisco to go to the International Bulk Wine and Spirits Convention, and that's where I found the bourbon that we have on shelves right now, the 6-year. And
Got you. So this one.
yeah.
Okay.
that almost didn't happen a couple of different ways. One, I am a person that doesn't always pay attention to details, and I flew
Me
to
either.
San Diego and not San Francisco. Yeah.
Sounds like something I would have done, Randy.
Yeah. And so
My wife will tell you in a heartbeat.
I'm sitting there because my
Absolutely.
wife normally books all my travel, but I did this one myself, and I was like, San, got it, boom. And so I call the hotel and I'm like, y'all have a shuttle, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what's it look like? And I'm waiting in the shuttle area, and I'm there forever. And I'm like, man, I made this Uber. And so I pulled up the Uber, and it said it was like a 7.5 hour Uber ride.
Hint, you're in the wrong place.
And I'm like, oh no. So I go back in to the counter, and I was like, I walk out, and it's this really nice, like, they're not flight attendants, but the gate agent, really nice gate
Sure.
agent. She's like, hello, sir. How can I help you? And I said, I need help. I'm incredibly stupid. And she goes, oh, don't say that about yourself, sir. And I said, you don't know what I've done yet.
That's
But
hilarious.
she was able to get me redirected. I was only about 3 hours late. I did make the convention. I found the whiskey, liked it. But the guy gave me an age that was off by almost a year. And the age with the pricing made it so that it didn't quite work. And then when I saw like the detailed specifications from a email that he sent out, I was like, wait a minute, if it's that old, then we're almost to 6 years. In fact, by the time we get it and we let it age in Texas for a little bit, it will be a 6-year-old. And then we can afford to sell it for a price that it makes sense for us to buy it. And so, there's 100 stories like that. Like when you start your own brand, like first off, if you think about starting your own brand, just don't do it. It's a terrible
I
idea.
don't have time for it. Yeah.
You will regret it.
I want to be part of the things that are happening like this, but I don't want to be.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a million little things like that happen that you just got to roll the punches and just keep moving forward. But that's kind of how we started the brand. And, so we try to find whiskeys that we feel like are a good value. And, I don't want to have $100 or $120 non-age stated bottle. I don't buy those bottles, and I don't want to ask people to buy those bottles for my brand.
Right.
We try to keep everything under $12 per year of age. But you brought up this 12-year-old, and forever we were trying to find a way to get a product to the market.
I don't know if that'll ever zoom in, but that's what I paid for it. If it'll ever focus on it, will it?
Almost.
No, that's not doing it. Anyway, I'll tell you, $53.99, and I had a friend tell me he picked one up for $40 today, and that very well may have been Chris. Chris said he bought a 6 and a 12-year today, so he may have been the one that got it for $40. I was like, dope. How do you get a 12-year for $40?
40 is pretty low price. The SRP on that is $49.99, but sometimes shipping and excise tax causes it to be a little bit more in different states. But yeah, the story on that was when I met Carlos, which was, like I mentioned 5 years ago, I interviewed him for the podcast, and I was in his office, and he goes, "Hey, I just got some 7-year cash strength rye whiskey from Canada. Do you want to try it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll try anything." And I pick up this bottle, and it's like the color of straw. It didn't have any color.
Yeah.
And I pour it, and it was real ethanol forward. And I was like, "Yeah, you're not going to be able to sell that."
Right.
And he's like, "What do you think I should do with it?" And I'm like, "Well, you're going to have to rebarrel all of it, because whatever you got, it doesn't have any color. It needs to develop." And so, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months ago, Carlos was like, "Hey, we got all this 12-year, it's this whiskey. We rebarreled it, like you said, 5 years ago. And it's 12 years old now. Do you want to try it and see if it might be right for the Prideful Goat?" And I tried it and I loved it. I still have these are the bottles that they sent me that I used to do the blend on the bar that I'm sitting at right now. That's awesome. I put together a blend that was, based on the ratios of the different barrel sources that we had. And then I have a hydrometer here, so I proofed it down to see what it was like at 100 proof. And then I reached out to the financial team and said, "Can we sell this whiskey to our wholesalers at this price and the distillery be okay financially?" And they approved it. And so now we have a sub $50 12-year whiskey. And to my knowledge, it's the first 12-year-old new release that's come out in, I don't know, at least 5 years. It's been a bit.
I tell you, I mean, when you get under $10 a year, that to me is just bargain. But the thing that worked for me was I had not tried it. I'd seen some of your stuff on the shelf, and I didn't know how involved you were with it. I knew your name was associated with it. And I went into Martin's in New Orleans, and he had some and let us try it. He had one of the 6 years open. And I was like, I've absolutely got to have it when I tried it. And I think that's a huge benefit for you guys. If it can get into stores where they can share it with people and people will at least try it, that's going to be huge. And there again, you and I talked about, sending samples around to people. That's something that I love to do. And that's something I'll absolutely do with these, because it's something that I like that I feel like people may not know about. And so, my goal is to let people try the juice. I mean, great that it would be helping you, but more or less let people know that, hey, there's a great juice out there that's very affordable. You need to go try it. I haven't opened the bourbon yet, so I'm going to do that next. But I'm excited to try that. The 6-year, I love the flavor profile and that little extra proof on it. But that 12-year is just crisp. It's delicious, and I definitely don't think you proofed it down too far by any means.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever release anything below 100 proof on the Prideful Goat. I mean, they've talked about doing some stuff down to 90 and whatnot, and I just said, no, that's really not right for our brand. The people who watch my podcast are 100 proof and above, probably for their average pour. And
Right.
if they want water in their whiskey, they'll do it at home.
That's right. That's what I like. I like room to move, right?
Right.
Because you get to a point where
right.
It's just not enough, and you can't add more to it. So
yeah. Although I am working on a technique to see if I can raise the proof of the whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah. It's called cold fingering, and it's not as dirty as it sounds. But apparently,
doesn't sound pleasant.
Yeah. Apparently in Scotland, they have a problem because they have so much humidity and their barrel entry proofs are so low that occasionally the barrel's average proof drops below 80 proof.
Okay.
Which makes it illegal to bottle as a whiskey.
Right.
And so they got all this, whiskey, they got all this money tied up in.
They got to be
aging for years.
Batch it with something higher.
And they're not allowed to, add like a grain neutral spirit or something in it the technique is illegal. But
oh, really?
Yeah, but it's called cold fingering, and they have this device that pumps. It's like a glycol chiller, and they drip the whiskey onto this thing that looks kind of like a finger, and it's got the freezing cold glycol in it, and it pulls water out of the whiskey because the water flash freezes, but the ethanol doesn't. And so I'm trying to like create my own kind of glycol chiller using dry ice and whatnot. We've done some experimenting with it. Our first few experiments didn't work very well, but if I ever get it to work out, I'm going to make an episode called, how people will mix like Weller Antique and Weller 12 and
Poor Man Pappy.
Yeah, and they call it Poor Man's Pappy. If I ever figure it out, I'm gonna make an episode called Welfare LaRue Weller, and I'm gonna proof Weller 12 back up to William Weller proofs. So hopefully I can figure it out because it'd be cool as shit. But
I wonder if you have enough water there to gain that kind of proof. I would think that it would be a minimal increase, but I mean, who knows?
We'll see.
TJ said, "What's up?" He came in a little while ago. Hey, TJ. Bobby said, "Let me know if you want to take me up on those samples." I don't know if he was talking to you or me on that.
So you
Bobby Jenkins with Flight Crew.
Oh, Flight Crew, love Flight Crew.
Yeah, so Bobby with Flight Crew is who said that. Let him know if you want to take him up on those samples. I don't know if that was me or you because he and I've been talking some too. So,
Bobby K.
Yep.
Bobby K's a woman.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that. I haven't met them. I'm so sorry.
BK.
Awesome.
Love me some BK.
I just met them through TJ and was able to get a bottle of their latest barrel pick from Barton. I haven't picked it up yet, but hopefully I'll get that in December from TJ.
All right, so you first drank your 6 year. I'm switching to the 6 so we can drink the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, this will be a first for me because all I've had is the Rise.
What batch number do you have?
Now you're gonna make me put my glasses on in front.
Oh, it's tiny too.
There we go. Batch 3.
All right, we're not drinking the same batch.
You're on batch 1, I bet.
I do have a batch 1.
How did I know?
I think there's 5 batches of the.
Okay.
So there's, I just happen to have old bottles in here. What's the proof on
Bobby
yours?
was still on and heard me do that. That's embarrassing. However, never met. So sorry about that, Bobby. I do apologize. 118.7.
Yeah, you got the slightly higher proof. Mine's 114.8, but I mean they're barrel proofs, whatever they come out at.
That's my jam, man. Cask strength barrel proof is it. Right under that would be a full proof. So
yeah, so our barrels are all MGP for all of our products except for the 12-year. And MGP is a real interesting aging environment because they lose about a proof point to a proof point and a half per year aging in that environment because it's real humid. And the buildings are extremely insulated because they're brick buildings. Like your house that's brick
with cement floors, right?
Yeah, but they're also, the Ohio River runs along the backside of all of the aging facility. And
that's the area people prefer, is it not?
Yeah, and the buildings are kind of below grade. There's like a berm that separates the river,
Mm-hmm.
And that makes the humidity high, and it makes the river act kind of like a swamp cooler. And it keeps the building's temperature from changing very much. And so
you don't get that rapid aging because of the fluctuation.
No,
that makes sense.
And that's why MGPs taste so different depending on like where they're being bottled at. Because if they get those barrels and age them at all in their local environment, it's going to have a big impact because the environment of aging at MGP is so gentle, and the whiskey actually drops in proof. So way back in the day, before people figured out that high age MGP was really awesome liquid, Smooth Ambler used to release some cask strengths that were below 100 proof.
Wow. And see that's another thing, right? The proof in that is one thing, but it's still going to have that concentrated flavor because it's cask strength, right? But
yeah,
it's going to miss that little bit of proof.
And so ours come to us, and they're usually around 113, 114. And then they start to go back up in proof depending on how much time they spend in Houston. And so yours are probably closer to 7 years. And that's why they're 118, because they would have been much lower when we got it.
Well, it's definitely delicious. I'm sitting here thinking about your pretentious whiskey snob commercials. I don't know how many people I've shared that with, dude. That's absolutely hilarious. And I've got to get one of the kits because I keep telling myself, go get it. I need that. But that's the funniest commercial in the world.
We got some big discounts coming for Black Friday. So just wait until next week and get a great big old fat discount.
Dude, that's delicious. I think I like that better than the rye. Oh wow.
I personally like the rye more.
I don't dislike any of them.
I mean, I don't bottle anything I don't think is a good value.
This has a ton of flavor and mouthfeel to it. Like
the cool thing,
crazy legs,
is this one, the 6-year. It's one of those ones where I'm like, what would this be like with just a little bit more age? And I'm doing a 8-year release of the bourbon. It's going to be like extremely limited because we only have a small number of barrels. I won't focus. But we did oh, there it is. That's nuts. We did a 8-year single barrel pick for my suicide prevention fundraiser. Okay. And my label's been approved, so I'm just waiting to find out when the print company can produce the labels because they're always backed up. So we have an 8-year single barrel of this coming out, and it'll be the first one that's ever been done. And then we have a very small number of 8-year barrels left, and I'll do a what they call a LTO, a limited time offer, 8-year on this. And
whatever you can do to get me on the list, I want one of those. I'll be following.
Yeah, well, we'll release the 8-year single barrel for Live Stay Project on the Facebook group. because we'll have to have that, get that sold, and we'll figure out a way to get that out to people. But
so Randy States and Jerry Mayo are asking any distribution to Missouri. I know when you and I talked, basically you said you could go to your local store and they could talk to their distributor and pretty much get it, no problem, right?
That's because I knew we already had distribution in your state.
Okay.
So Missouri, hold on, I got a little spreadsheet here. Distribution by state, and I think Missouri is a franchise state. And so a lot of people don't understand this, but the greatest whiskey that's ever been made, you'll never taste, because they went out of business. Because the structure of the liquor world is set up to keep big companies growing and to bankrupt people who try to enter into the market. And it was created that way by all of the gangsters that made their fortune during Prohibition. And they're effectively the ones that wrote all the laws in the 1930s that we still operate under today. And the liquor industry needs an overhaul. But
it does.
There's too much
racketeering.
There's too much big money involved, and too many, politicians that are beholden to that money for that to be a reasonable expectation anytime in the near future. But there are 3 types of states. One type is we'll call it the free agent state. And you can sign with anybody that you want. And if they're not doing a good job, you can fire them and you can move to somebody else.
As it should be.
I would think so. However, there were some states that observed that beer producers would go in and they'd go, "Hey, Brandon, you got a little wholesale company. Let me hire you to be the distributor of my great big beer brand." And then you go, "Oh my God, this is the greatest day of my life." And you go to your bank and you go, "Hey, bank, I just got this massive contract. I'm going to have to hire a ton of people. I'm going to have to sign a bunch of new leases. I got to get a leasehold improvements. I got to have, vehicles and transport trucks, and I need a loan." And the banks go, "Oh, well, let me see the contract." And they look at the contract and they go, "Sure enough, you got the contract. Here's the money." And then the company builds all of it out, and they hire all the people, and they have all the buildings and all that stuff. And then the beer distributor calls them up, or the beer producer calls them up and says, "Gotcha, bitch. We're lowering the price that we pay you for your services." And they go, "Well, you can't do that." And they go, "Well, we're a free agent. And your competitor down the street says that they'll do it for a little bit less. And so you're going to do it for a little bit less. And if you don't, we're going to leave you. And you're going to default on your loan to your bank. And you're going to fire all those employees. And all those trucks are going to have to go off to auction."
Yep.
Sounds like you're lowering your price, aren't you?
A whiskey barrel.
Right?
Yeah, I think you are. I call that the golden rule, he who hath the goal make the rule.
Right. And so some states got tired of that happening. And so they made a rule that once you signed with somebody, it was like you were married.
That's not great either, though, right?
And you have to get a divorce to get separated. And you have to go to court, and you have to prove cause, and you have to spend money on attorneys, and you have to make them whole and make sure that they're financially taken care of for all the obligations that they took on as a result of them being in this relationship. And those are called franchise states. Okay. So non-franchise states are free agent. Franchise states, once you pick somebody, you're stuck with them forever, basically, unless you have tons of money to buy your way out of this situation. And so what ends up happening, though, is that those franchise state laws are used by unethical business people who are at the wholesale tier to lock down brands. And what they'll sometimes do is they'll sign a brand that they never intended on representing at all. And they'll put in a small purchase order and bring their product in, and then not tell their salespeople to push it, which is they're paid. The wholesaler is paid to sell product to, in most states, to sell product to bars and restaurants and retail stores. And they don't do that. And then in some instances, there's even a clause in the contract that if your product doesn't sell, you have to pay storage fees.
Ooh.
And so sometimes some of the bigger evil distilleries will sign new emerging brands so they can bankrupt them. And they'll bring product in, not sell it, and then start charging them storage fees, but they do it in multiple states. And the brand can't fire them because they're in franchise states, and they have no choice but to pay the storage fees, but they're not generating any revenue because they're not selling any new product, and eventually it bankrupts them. And so that's what in the industry that's called being back shelved. So sometimes a wholesaler will like sell you a song and a dance so that they can back shelf you and make sure that you don't become a competitor to a more important brand that they're already doing well with. And, you know, there's all of this like subterfuge and, you know, misleading like conversations and things like that happen behind the scenes. And that's why when people call me and they're like, I want to start my own brand. And I'm like, do you have $25 million? You don't care if you lose? And they're like, no. And I'm like, do you have a massive following that you don't need marketing dollars? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then for the love of God, whatever you do, don't do this. Because, you know, you'll be like me and you go out there and you're like, hey, I want to be distributed in, you know, Missouri. And you have 5 different meetings with 5 different companies and they all say the same thing. And then you sign with one and they don't do shit. And then you want to fire them and you can't. And then they start sending you bills for storage of your product. And you either have to come up with the money to hire salespeople to go do their sales job, which you were already paying them for in the price that you sold the product to them for and the price that they're selling it to their customers. They were already being paid for sales. So either you send somebody to market to do their sales job for them and they get paid for a job that they didn't do, or you end up going bankrupt because the storage fees pile up and eventually you can't afford to do everything because you don't have any revenue, right? And so because of that reality, we are not ready to sign in franchise states.
I don't blame you.
We don't have enough success as a brand to negotiate the kind of contract that we would want in a state where we can't back out of the agreement if it doesn't go well. And so we focus on non-franchise states. And then the third type of state is a control state. And that's where the state ABC basically controls everything, even the liquor stores. And they're kind of an interesting batch because they charge the same amount of money that you would be charged in a non-franchise state, but they don't provide sales support. They only provide warehouse and logistics. So they'll bring your product in and store it in the warehouse. And then when someone puts in an order, they'll send the truck out to deliver it, but they don't have salespeople that go out to the different accounts and say, hey, I think you should pick this up. And so most control states want you to hire a salesperson that lives in the state to support the market before they're willing to bring product into their warehouse, because they don't want product sitting there that their customers aren't buying and they don't have a way to get the word out. And so you kind of got to do it for them. And we don't have the money to be putting a full-time sales representative in a control state when we don't have any revenue being generated there. So we generally avoid franchise states and we generally avoid control states.
So Randy said, very informative breakdown. Hadn't heard anyone explain the average bourbon fan to understand the complexity of each state's distribution that way. And Jerry Mayo said, thanks for the peek behind the curtain, Randy. Terrible laws and ethics in the industry. So, and then Grant Fournier says, Randy, what kind of state is Rhode Island?
Rhode Island is, I think they're control. No, they're a non-franchise state. So we could go into Rhode Island. And we did talk with a wholesaler about opening up in like several states up there in the Northeast.
Okay.
And somehow that deal fell apart. And now we're dealing with another gentleman who's finishing up getting his licenses. He used to own a wholesale business. He sold it to a larger company, and he was waiting for his non-compete to run out so that he could start his business. And he started talking with us because his non-compete was for wine and not for spirits. And he thought that he could move forward with us. But once we got part of the way through the process, his warehouse partner got threatened with a lawsuit from the company that bought his wholesale business from him. And then he was like, I'm not going to warehouse for you because I don't want to get involved in this legal dispute. I don't care how right you are. I'm not spending money on this. So things like that happen. But I think we're pretty close to being able to launch in some areas up there in the Northeast, and that could expand. So.
Okay. Good to know. Grant, get with me later on, and we'll talk a little bit about getting you a sample or something. Same thing for those guys in Missouri. I'd love to help y'all out because you definitely need to try this, regardless of all the hoops. You're definitely doing some good stuff. So it looks like did Flight Crew do a barrel pick with you? Because TJ was saying that he was drinking a pour of the Flight Crew single barrel 123.5 proof, the Prideful Goat pick.
Yes. So the Flight Crew did 2 barrel picks. So crazy story. So we have distribution in New Orleans, obviously. You brought up Martin's.
It's my favorite.
So Wines Unlimited and Martin's are owned by the same people. And it's one of the only examples of a company that is both at the wholesale and the retail tier, because that is currently illegal. But they had formed those businesses and gotten those licenses before the Tide House laws were created, and they got grandfathered in. And so
awesome.
We're with Wines Unlimited in Louisiana. And so I was there doing market work, and we're sitting there at lunch, and there's this like handsome dude with a beautiful, like, I don't know how much you cuss on your show, but like his beard was like epic. Right. And he actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Wes's look, my show producer that's on with me.
Yeah.
And he's sitting next to me, and we're at this really awesome place. It's called Backyard. They've got great food, but they also, Louisiana is a little bit of like the Wild West, right? So this location is licensed as a on-premise restaurant where they can serve drinks for you to drink on premise. But they are also licensed as a producer. And it's one of the only places that I know of. Most distilleries are able to serve cocktails and things, but all the spirits that go into the drinks are usually made by them. It is not normal for you to go in and for them to have a wide selection of other people's spirits in their bar. And Backyard is like that. So I'm like geeking out with the owner who's thinking about picking up the Prideful Goat. And I think he did. In fact, I know he did. And I'm, eating his food, and he's sharing his whiskey with me, and I'm sharing my whiskey with him. And there's this dude sitting next to me. And it turned out to be Raybuck, who is like Raybuck and BK. They are the heads of Flight Crew. And the owner of Backyard is like, yeah, you should talk to this guy. Like, he's really involved in the whiskey enthusiast community. And I was a little bit upset because my wholesaler was supposed to set up some nighttime events for me. Because when I travel, we don't usually start visiting accounts until 10 or 11 in the morning. And then we have to be done at 4 or 4:30 because everyone gets busy with their customers starting around 5. And they don't want me standing there like, here, try this and try this, you know. And so they're supposed to set up nighttime events, but they had just had Tales of the Cocktail, which is like this huge industry-wide event that wipes out everybody in the industry. And nobody wanted to talk about nighttime events. And then Ray Buck's like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And I was like, I got nothing, bro. And he's like, will you drive up to North Shore? Because I could put a thing together. And I was like, I'll drive anywhere. And so I went up to North Shore, and we went to a restaurant, and Ray Buck set up. I think there were like a dozen people there. We did a tasting, and they were like, do you do single barrels? And I was like, I will let you do anything you want. And so within like 2 or 3 weeks, I think 8 people or something like that came from New Orleans to Houston. I went down to Houston and met them. And then they picked the first ever 6-year single barrel and the second ever or 6-year single barrel bourbon and the second ever 8-year single barrel rye. And the only other single barrel we've ever done in the 8-year was for our main retailer in Texas, which is Specs. And
so what do you guys look like in Georgia? Because all this sounds interesting to me, and I work with a guy in Georgia at Rome Liquor that I would love to do a pick with him. He does some phenomenal picks.
I technically have a wholesaler in Georgia, so we could probably work something out if we had everything all set up and it was solid.
I'll message you on the backside for that because I'd be interested.
And if we do, like, you know, for Flight Crew, I met them in Houston. We did the pick there. We did a whole day thing, private tours and all that stuff. And we did it at 2 different locations because the distillery owns a brewery called Tejas Brewing. It's this really beautiful facility that has a rooftop that overlooks like the Houston skyline and all that. We did all that. And then when the barrels hit the market, I flew in and we did a whiskey dinner for everybody to pick up. And I, you know, led everybody in a tasting and, you know, told them kind of the brand story. And I have a bunch of stories that I tell that are kind of entertaining. And then I make everyone cry at the end. It's great. And so
tug on those heartstrings, get your wallets out.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could for sure do that. I'm pretty sure.
I'd be interested in coming out there and doing a tour as well. I have a videographer that works with me. We do pretty good stuff. I'll send you some examples of his stuff, but he may even be interested in coming out there with me and doing a little feature or something, if that would help y'all out.
Yeah, it's like a 3.5, 4-hour drive for me to get down to the distillery from where I live, and I don't mind driving down there. And we have a more than a ball when people come in. So, but yeah, and I'd fly into Atlanta and go wherever I needed to go and meet up with whoever I needed to meet up with. We'd make it a good time.
I'd love to have you in Birmingham if I can ever figure out how to make that happen and make it worth your while and you know, set up the venue and the personnel to get there and make it work. So let's definitely talk about that because I'm a firm believer in the product and definitely a believer in you. You know, I looked at I watched your YouTube stuff as it is today. And somebody had asked me one day, because you get to comparing yourself, right? You know, like, have you ever dug back to some of these guys' like original videos? And so I dug back to some of your original videos and I was like, man, Randy has grown immensely. Like, he didn't start out just being awesome, right? But I do think the one thing I'm most envious of for you is that your wife gets on there with you. My wife's done one video with me. I'm like, babe, if I could just get you on there, like, your wife adds such a different dynamic to your show when she's there. It's huge, right? Because you resonate with a whole different crowd at that point. So I think that's awesome that you guys do that. But it's also awesome to see that your old videos are still there. And I can see you guys starting in your 4 year just talking about a bottle, right?
Yeah. It's so funny is that, that's one of the things that when somebody says like, I'm thinking about starting my own channel or whatever, I always tell them, don't get paralysis by analysis, because
I know that
you can
feeling.
do all the research in the world, and you can, and then you stumble across something, you go, oh, I don't know, like maybe this isn't the best way to do it. And then you do more research and you're like, oh, well, that other thing I thought was the right way to do it. Like this is the right way. And then you start digging into that and you go, oh crap, there's this other way, and
Never do anything.
right. And then you never do anything. Right. And so for me, I did enough research until I was comfortable, and which was not very much. And I went on eBay, and they had this podcasting package of equipment that you could buy, and it was, whatever, $350 or $400, whatever it was. And I bought it, and none of it worked. Like
how much equipment do we have to buy before we get it
right.
right? Like God knows I've spent so much money.
Yeah. And I've told people like I'm on my third or fourth set of equipment. Right. And
yes.
I didn't find
And
out.
I've only been doing this since April or so. I really started this in June, but I'm on the third camera. I don't know how many thousands of dollars I'm in.
Right.
And I'm still trying to figure it out.
So when people tell me like, oh, I like your podcast, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And they go, I'm going to go back to the beginning and watch all your videos. And I go, for the love of God, do not do that.
Yeah,
I want you to start
but that's transparency at its best, brother. And I'm glad
work backwards. And when it gets painful to watch, stop. Don't, because if you start at the beginning, it's going to be hard to get until it gets good. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be tough, but.
And I get the feeling that overall your wife may not love bourbon, but she will taste it and try to figure it out with you. But in the beginning, I mean, how did you ever get her there? Like last night, I put Heather on. I got the Jim Beam's Winter Reserve, and I was like, "This is perfect. I'm going to proof it down a little bit with some water, put a cube of ice in there. She's going to love this." She's still not picking it up. Now she loves her tequila, she loves vodka, but I can't get her on bourbon. And I'm like, babe, I need you, because my belief is the female sensory glands are just way more advanced than ours. They can pick up things out of that I'll never pick up, which is another reason I'm wanting your kit. But I'm like, I'm picking up things that I don't even know how to articulate, and I need your help because you can do it. But I don't know how you ever got her to doing that.
Yeah, it's been a slow process because I started in wine.
Okay.
And so I didn't, my story was, I got married when I was 20. My wife was 19. We've been married for 26 years. And when we got married, we were real involved with youth at our church. And it was just kind of frowned upon to have alcohol around and all that stuff.
I just saw Bobby K's message that you used to be a youth pastor, and I was going to bring that up in a minute because you and I have that in common.
Yeah,
I was a youth pastor when I was a senior in high school as well, and that was a rough time. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. And Bobby also said that females have 55 more taste buds than men. So there you go.
Yeah. So I was not. I was encouraged not to drink, and it wasn't important to me, so I didn't. And I didn't really start drinking until I was about 28. And it was after we had a couple kids, and I needed to pull back away from my church responsibility so that I could focus on my own family. And I started to figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. And I always liked whiskey, but I got really into wine because of the history. There's a book called Thomas Jefferson on Wine, and it's kind of a biography of him, but it talks in great detail about the history of wine importation in the early, stages of U.S. history, and, what Thomas Jefferson was bringing in. And of course, Benjamin Franklin plays, heavily in that because he was the ambassador to France, and that's what got the support for us fighting against the British and all that stuff. And it's a real interesting book, but, I really always love that history and those elements of it. But eventually I And my wife, she wasn't really a drinker per se, and if she did drink anything, it might maybe a pina colada, some like sugary thing. And eventually, though, because of my passion and being around, she would try things, and then her palate developed, and she learned to, appreciate the nuance. And that same sort of thing kind of happened with whiskey whenever I transferred over from wine to whiskey. It wasn't that she was like, "Oh, let me have a whole glass of that," but she'd come up, she'd take a sip out of my glass, and she'd give me her thoughts. And over time, she's developed the ability to appreciate the nuance of a spirit, whether it be bourbon or rye or even tequila or rum. I'm literally surrounded by rum, tequila, and cognac bottles that you can't see that are off camera.
I try to keep the blinders on because early on right now I'm going broke just buying whiskey and bourbon, right? Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole,
but most of these were acquisitions because of Lindsay, right? So she has actually really diverse palate, and she can appreciate everything. And as Bobby K mentioned, and you alluded to, like, women by their nature have more detailed palate analytic ability than men do. So I'm grateful to have her on. But the other thing that
Absolutely.
makes it fun is that she's so worried about like looking silly that it's real easy to get her riled up. And
That's
then
fun.
we get good outtakes because I say something that whips up her passions, and then she kicks me off the camera or whatever, which
right. I think it's awesome. Like when I watch y'all, I guess I study it too much, but I watch how she'll say something and then she looks at you almost for approval, right? Like, just the way y'all interact together and how she interacts with you is a beautiful thing. And I think it's great for your show. It's great for your community. So
that's a very interesting observation, because I'm always fighting with her to feel more comfortable to say whatever, right?
She doesn't look 100% comfortable, but she definitely has it down pat from where she started.
But think about Wes, right? Wes started coming on the show when he knew nothing, and he would just talk. But I review all of our episodes on usually Wednesday before we release them on Friday morning. And if Wes ever said anything off the cuff that was inaccurate, I just have him edited out. And so I've been trying to encourage Lindsay, like, we'll fix it in post. Just talk. Like, show zero hesitation. Just get out there and say whatever comes to mind. That's what, that kind of dynamic is what makes it fun and entertaining for people to watch. And it's just not her personality. And she wants me to go through the entire script and tell her like what all the subjects are that we're going to discuss before we get started. And somebody like Wes, like, he shows up, I don't even tell him what the title of the episode is, right? Like,
he just goes with it.
We just go, right? and he's
and that's me. Maybe that's dangerous. I don't script very well, and I know I should, but I just go with it. But Lord knows, like today, I must have done 5 takes of this one video, because one video I didn't have the main camera on, one video I didn't have the side camera on, one video the mic wasn't on, but everything else was working. Just it's tough. It's tough, man.
Yeah, if you go and you watch the tequila episode that I released on Friday, you can see the camera like trying to autofocus the main camera. And I mean, that stuff still happens, and I'm reviewing it and I'm like, well, we don't have anything to release that doesn't have this autofocus problem,
Right.
And 4 of the 6 episodes that we released that or recorded the day that we had the autofocus problem were re-records from 3 weeks ago when we had an audio issue. Like, I'm not.
I don't think people understand that. They think we get in front of a camera, we say it, we release it, and it's done. Like,
no,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And And you used the analogy when I first got started, and Lord knows it's just hitting home now, but you're like, if you want this thing to work, you're gonna have to feed the monster, but you've also got to feed the birds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this thing is a constant effort. You've got to constantly be getting after it. If you're not keeping YouTube happy, then you're not going to succeed there. But if you're not keeping the people that are following you happy and giving them what they need as well, then they're gonna quit following you, right? So
yeah, and there are certain episodes that I do that I'm like, this was for me, right? Like interviewing Freddie Johnson. That video didn't get very many views, but a goal of mine, and to be able to sit down with somebody that has that level of history in the industry and
right,
whose family fought through probably racial bias and things like that,
mm-hmm.
during a different time to get them where they're at today. And just so important, like so critical.
Right.
And then, doing an episode like the one that I did about Old Charter going up for auction and be like major Kentucky or, well-known Kentucky distillery shuts down and goes up for auction. I knew
I'm so
that
heartbroken
the
about that.
algorithm was just going to be like, yes,
yeah, we're
and I was going to get exposure to a bunch of people that don't normally watch my podcast. So, right. and then sometimes there's videos that I do that I'm like, the nerds that love my content are going to really enjoy this, but it's not going to trigger the algorithm. It's just
right.
And
it's wild. We did a Heather film on my phone. We were at Heaven Hill, and I filled a bottle of Elijah Craig, and I videoed it and labeled it whatever. Right, 25,000 views. I pay a videographer $700 to go put together this top-notch distillery tour and barrel pick at Detling. Gets less than 1,000 views. What in the world,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things to ask creators is what is the piece of content that you thought would resonate the most with the people that didn't? And what's the piece of content that resonated the most with people that shocked you? That you thought was a
just gave them to you.
And that applies to everybody. Like we're friends with some recording artists and whatnot. And when you ask an actual creator that question, like their eyes light up because they're like, I can talk about this, right? Like this is
spot on. I know exactly the one. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my case, like my video hit my channel hit algorithm with videos that had been published for 6 months or a year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me hope, maybe.
Well, that's why I tell content creators, like, first off, if you're doing it for views, don't start because you may not ever get the views. You have to be doing it for a different reason, right?
That's right.
But if you are doing it, you have to do it consistently and you have to not give up. And I tell people, assume that it's going to be a year and a half before YouTube even gives you a shot, right?
Right.
And it was at about a year and a half. It was the middle of December. It was near my wife's birthday. And I pulled up my YouTube just to check comments, which now I have to check comments every day. But, back then I maybe check them once a week because no one was watching. And I was like, damn, I got like 700 views today. It was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. We hadn't published anything since Friday. I'm like, how did I get 700 views in one day? That's crazy. It's normally like, 150. Maybe on Friday when I released the episode, if it had a clickbaity title, maybe it'd get, 400 views or 500 views. But to get like 700 views on a random day of the week when I hadn't released anything, I was like, that's weird. And then the next day it was like 2,200. And then the next day it was like 12,000. Then the next day it was like 19,000. And I was like crip walking around the house, like no one can tell me shit. Like I was so excited. And then I watched all my numbers tick back down. right? And that's how the algorithm works. You know, YouTube decides what videos you watch. If you're, you know, if you're watching this live stream and you don't know this, you don't pick what you watch. YouTube
I believe
picks
that.
what you watch. And sometimes as a content creator, you make the YouTube algorithm happy, and sometimes you don't, you know. And
yeah, who knows what that special code is, right? Like,
well, I mean, you can kind of look to see what's trending on other whiskey channels and then try to, you know, make content about those types of subjects. But for me, I don't watch other people's content because I'm real worried about plagiarism. But I may go look and go, oh, damn, like normally their videos get 10,000 views when they release them, but this one got 40,000. What was the topic? And then I go, could I make a topic, a video about this topic that's, you know, authentic? And since I don't watch the video, it's always a totally unique thing. But the other channels do the same shit to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the game, right?
You know, I released a video not too long ago that got 50,000 views in the first week, and then, you know, one of the other top 5 channels released a video on the same subject a couple days later. Like, we are, if the public's interested in something, then we should be covering it, right? Like, I agree. And there's no harm in that. And not, you know, when I meet other content creators, you know, the top 10, you know, channels that you think of, I tell them, you know, I look at your channel to see which videos are trending well, and I may decide to make a video about a similar topic, right?
Yeah, no harm in that. I don't.
But all my videos are unique because I didn't watch the content. I just do the content the way that I would have wanted to consume that information about that subject, right?
Right. So Jerry Mayo says the Bourbon Real Talk community Facebook group is awesome with how you do outreach to your followers and keeping the engaging content. How do you implement those outreach and community building with the Prideful Goat brand?
It's a little bit harder to do it with the brand, but the long-term answer is that we are going to start a Pursuit United like ambassador program where those that are engaged with the community and what we're doing, that have really, you know, bought into the idea of the brand, will be given the opportunity to become kind of brand ambassadors in their local area.
Awesome.
And for pay, it won't be like a volunteer situation. But we'll come up with a payment structure where you get paid per piece of work, and it's something that you do maybe on the weekends, as opposed to hiring one full-time person that you pay, you know, $75,000 or $90,000 to, plus bonuses, that's geographically restricted. You know, let's take that same amount of money and have 20 different people spread out over 20 different markets, and, you know, pay them per piece of work. And we're only paying money when somebody's doing something that's dollar cost productive. And then they get to do something that they're passionate about and put a little extra money in their pockets. Right. So I think long-term, that's probably the way to engage. But trying to create community around a brand is a little icky. You know what I mean? Like, if I started like the Prideful Goat Whiskey Club, right? And then it was all about promoting the brand and growing the brand and all that stuff, there's not as much authenticity to connect people to the core values of the group as there is in Bourbon Real Talk community. You know, because
I think tying the Prideful Goat back to the Bourbon Real Talk thing is maybe the way to do it, because which leads back to you and your whole cause for ever starting Bourbon Real Talk. And if you need somebody in Birmingham, I'm your man, because I mean I do travel a lot. I've got access to your stuff, but and I'm interested in trying to help you grow and get into other areas as well. But
Yeah, I mean, when that program is created, we'll put it out on all the social.
Even before then, I mean, there again, I'm not 100% into this thing for compensation. I'm into it for the main cause of sharing great juice with people, but ultimately using whiskey for what it's doing for me, and that's just bringing people together and making networks happen.
Right. Yeah. And so I probably wouldn't try to grow a community around the Prideful Goat brand. I also occasionally get negative feedback about bringing in my whiskey brand into the community, and I'm like, well, I mean, it's easy for you to be a person that's on the outside that's a beneficiary of all the time, energy, and effort that it takes to build this type of stuff and to maintain it when we're under constant attack. Every single day, there's some troll that gets in there that wants to destroy everybody's good time and all that stuff, and they have to be filtered out. And then they send all these negative messages, and we delete something, and they try to repost it and talk shit about the admins and all that. Like, there's a lot.
I saw a post like that last week in your group, and I was very disappointed in that. And
yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. And we're just constantly fighting it. And so knowing the time, energy, and effort that it takes to create that kind of community. And then, if I mention my own brand, people are like, well, we're not here just to support you. I'm like, well, if you don't support me, all this shit goes away. So I'm going to say it sometimes. I'm not going to make it the main purpose. Okay.
Well, and it's not like when we watch your show, you don't talk about this 100%. You mention it, you sprinkle it in, right? And as well, you should be proud of this, man.
And that's my philosophy, is that I don't, I give without expectation, but I also feel like it's fair for me to present opportunities for people to give back. And I don't make it the 100% focus. I don't do it all the time. But yeah, I mean, there is a tie-in, if you love the idea of me and my wife having time to work on the suicide prevention nonprofit, one of the ways that you could make it possible for us to continue to grow that is by supporting our whiskey brand. Right.
Right. And that's something that I'm struggling with. And I talked to you about early on, because this year's been 100% on me. And that's something that I need, because I'm doing this because I love whiskey, but I'm also doing it because I care about people that are on a whiskey journey. And if there's anything that I can experience that's going to help them, then that's what I'm wanting to video and put out there for them. Right. So, but then I'm also hesitant to ever ask for somebody to contribute monetarily, which here I am going broke trying to provide it to them. Right. So I think it's fair, right? You're providing a service to people, and you're helping them to understand things, and you're a wealth of knowledge. Like the things that you've shared just tonight are like leaps and bounds above the things that I could share. But no, I think that's absolutely fair, Randy.
It's a balance, and you personally have to be comfortable with it, right? Like for a long time, I'd tell people, well, I'm a merch. I don't have a Patreon, right? I'm not asking for donations. Just go buy my merch. And then when I launched a Patreon, people said, oh, well, what happened about not ever having a Patreon? I'm like, well, shit changed. I have a producer now, and I had to hire a marketing company and all this stuff. I mean, at one point, before anything, I had to make $75,000 a year just to cover the basic expenses of the marketing company, production, and the employee that I employed.
And you shared that with me early on, and I'm experiencing that right now, because I've got a great guy that's doing videography, and he'll travel with me and he'll edit it. But it's going to cost me $500 to $800, depending on where we're going and what we're doing, for him to do that. And it's worth that. I've tried to do it on my own. Oh, I can do this myself. I can, but it's not what it needs to be. If your thing is, you're a great electrician, maybe you need to pay somebody to cut your grass so that you can go do more electrical work. Right?
Right.
You don't know how to operate a lawnmower, or you don't have a lawnmower. You got to rent it every time. So that's my belief in it. But you told me that early on, and I was like, man, Randy's paying that per show, dude. That's actually very affordable. But I mean, I guess you've got them set up on retainer, and they know that it's a frequent thing, and it makes it worth their while. So you've got a good thing set up. But there's a huge cost in this. And aside from that, just going around, the fuel and the rooms and the food and the whiskey costs, like it's huge
Well,
for
luckily,
what we try to do.
the distillery reimburses me for my travel expenses, but
That's awesome.
they do.
They didn't originally, right? I mean,
Well,
you've
I
grown
mean,
into
originally
that.
we didn't even know we were growing a brand, right? And so when I
Yeah.
was going down to Houston and all that stuff, and then I buy all the bottles that I drink at retail. You know, it's not like I get to submit a requisition request and they give me bottles for me to drink and have around the house, you know. I mean, I can, but they have to be used for media, you know, so I can take them to tastings, or I can send them to, you know, somebody that's considering to pick up the brand as a wholesaler, but I can't drink those bottles. I can't share them with my friends. You know, I've got,
Right.
I mean, I bet over the years I've spent between $15,000 and $18,000, maybe even $20,000 buying my own brand of whiskey.
Wow. 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 That's huge.
Yeah.
And Heather looks at me and she's just like, dude, when's it gonna stop? You know, like this is just getting outrageous with the amount of money you spend on whiskey. And I'm like, I need bottles for content. There's people out there that want to know about this bottle that aren't going to go buy it. I can buy it, so I'm going to. But you know, the people that are watching the videos or the people that we're helping, they may not understand that. And shame on me because you know I haven't reached out to people and shared that. But there's a lot of cost that goes into doing this, and I didn't realize it getting started. And I'm so invested in it, and I love it so much. I'm not going to stop unless my revenue stream cuts off and I can't do it. But
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you know, I generate revenue from, you know, the merchandise. I generate revenue from Patreon now, and I get a little bit of money from ads on audio, and I get a little bit of money from YouTube, you know, but I
well,
mean,
even the merchandise has been a nightmare in the beginning, right? You and I shared that, and you don't have to talk about it tonight. But I mean, you struggled with that early on, and you know had a good thing going, and had to jump some hurdles, and none of it has been easy.
no. I mean, hell, I got a commercial packing station in my garage that was almost $2,000, you know, and it's like, you know, you think you're getting ahead, and then you're like, well, we really need this equipment, or we need a camera, or we need this, or we need that, and you start doing the math, and you're like, shit.
Yeah, need a better computer, need a better microphone, need better lighting,
yeah,
it's
you know,
non-ending.
But at the same time, you know, and we can kind of go in a closing direction, and I'll start to take it towards, you know, my show philosophy. But, you know, every so often I'll, and I don't know if this has happened to you yet, but in YouTube, you have comments, and then there are comments that have been held for review.
I haven't seen those. Yeah.
And those are comments that like the bot looked at and they go, you know, this may
Looks
not
suspect.
be good, you know, this may be bad. And then there's a third level that are comments that are held for review that they have identified that might be psychologically damaging to you if you even read them. And you have to click a disclosure before they'll show them to you.
Oh, dear Lord.
Okay. And, you know, you get off in there, and, you know, I got doxxed one time, and somebody released my home address and said, you know, let's go fuck this guy up. And, you know, I've had,
oh, wow.
I've had people, you know, wish bad things on my marriage or my kids, or, you know, you get all of this negativity out there. And the one thing that it's really hard for me to articulate is that, I didn't start off to do this to make money. I was kind of floundering after having lost my brother to suicide and not really knowing what was worth my time and what would make me feel like I was making a difference in somebody else's life. And I just found this world of whiskey, and it gave me a sense of meaning and purpose, and it gave me a platform to be able to positively influence people who might be struggling. And what those people that say, like, I hope your kids die of cancer, and all the terrible things that people say online, what they don't understand is that one, my show's actually for them, because no one acts like that unless they're hurting.
Something's going on. Yeah.
Something's going on. And I hope that through some miracle, I'm able to get through whatever that thing is that causes them to act that way, and encourage them to get healthy and, get to a happier place in life. But two, even if that's not going to happen for them, they're never going to stop me, because they don't see the private messages that I got from the person who had a suicide plan and backed out at the last moment.
That's
because
beautiful.
my message was resonating with them. They don't see
That's
that.
awesome.
No one sees that. Only I see that. Right.
Right.
So one time I got the opportunity to interview Fred Minnick, who's one of my heroes.
I would absolutely love to meet him. I just realized that he was a veteran, that he served time overseas. He was a photographer overseas. And as a photographer, I can't imagine you ever seeing some of the things that he might have seen. My dad was Vietnam Big Red 1. He was 82nd Master Jumper, retired first sergeant. So I have some military background, but really just from a brat standpoint, I didn't know that about Fred. But Seth reached out to him. I've reached out to him. So I hope that I get to meet him eventually.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly a busy guy.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten the opportunity to talk with him a number of times. And
but whiskey has saved him, even.
Sure.
Right? When we talk about it. Yeah.
And when I was interviewing him, my interview it went way longer than my channel allows. And, I was just asking him questions. And I asked him, I said, how do you deal with the hate? Because, when I started to get hate, I lost everything local. Like, I got kicked out of all of the local whiskey clubs when I started my podcast. Like, it everyone hated
really
me. Yeah. I mean, like, close friends of mine called
and
me.
what on what premise? Like,
Literally,
what's going on?
everyone is talking shit about you. Like, the people that you think are your friends are talking shit about you behind your back. One of my friends literally said these words to me: everyone hates you.
For what reason?
I don't know, man. But, I get on the phone with Fred Minnick, and we were actually recording, and I asked him, I said, how do you deal with that? And he said, I've been in war. I've had bullets fly past my head that could have hit me. And he
didn't have anything to fire back with.
Behind him, there's combat boots that are on the shelf behind him when he's recording. And he pointed at the combat boots and he said, I wore those in war. I saw people die. And he said, so if these people think they're going to come in and make fun of me, and then I'm going to knuckle under and cower, and, I'm going to stop, they don't really know who I am.
Right.
And I ended up editing that and a couple of other personal things that he said out of the video, because it wasn't pertinent to the conversation, but it was really just for me. because I was struggling and I was trying to figure out a way, and so that's really the thing that keeps me going, right? Um, the podcast is technically not losing money now, but it certainly lost money for the first 4 years,
Guaranteed.
and
And that's what I keep telling myself. Let's give it 3 or 4 years here. Like it. Oof.
Right, but that's why I say like it can't be about the money. It's got to be about something else, or only an insane person would keep going if you didn't have a bigger why than making money, because the odds of actually even making it to where I've made it are what, 1 in 100,000. It's statistically impossible. I got lucky.
But you had a great why with your brother, unfortunately, and
right. And so
we lost my wife's grandfather to the same thing, and something I would have never. This man had read the Bible through 11 times, like never would have imagined it. But
so that's ultimately the lesson that I learned, was that if Fred Minnick can go through that, and I'm going through what I've gone through in this, and I have the people that tell me they'd like to see my kids die of cancer, and whatever the crazy things are that people say online. At the end of the day, I am doing it because I do get those private messages. I do get those phone calls. One time I got a phone call. I got a private message on a Saturday night, and I didn't have anything going on. And the guy said, "Hey, I lost a loved one to suicide, and I'm familiar with your channel and your message. And I would just like to talk with you sometime."
that's
and
awesome.
I called him right then.
I was about to say, you're that guy. You reached out to him.
And we stayed on the phone for an hour and a half. And he didn't lose a loved one one time. He had found his deceased father hanging the day before. I wasn't ready. Now, remember earlier when I told you that I get a lot of phone calls from a lot of people and I talk to everyone and I don't catalog at all?
Oh, you catalog that.
I didn't. I knew that there was a person that I cared about immensely and that I spent time on the phone with and all that stuff, but my brain didn't index like, this is this person's name and this is what this person went through.
Wow.
So a year later, I don't normally do shit on my deceased brother's death anniversary. I don't typically spend time around people that I'm not very close with. It's just too much. I'm too emotionally overwhelmed. But
how long has that been?
10 years. It was 10 years this year on July the 20th. So
and it's still very, very raw. And so
on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death, those are the 2 days that I'm in my feelings. And I usually watch Peter Butter Falcon, which is my favorite movie.
I love that movie.
And my
You're
brother
invited to my birthday.
Very much like the main character that Shia LaBeouf plays, and I cry the whole time and all that stuff. So that's normally what I do.
That's a great movie. Great movie.
I guess it was maybe a little over a year ago. There was a local distillery that was doing a charity fundraiser, and the charity fundraiser happened to fall on the anniversary date of my brother's suicide. And so I didn't have a choice. I needed to go. And I was there with 3 other dudes that had signed up to do this charity fundraiser thing. And we're all there hanging out. And I tell them when I get there, I said, "Hey, man, if I seem a little off or I'm, withdrawn or whatever, like, just know this is the anniversary of my brother's suicide. I normally don't go out on this day, but I want to be here to do this with you guys." And the distillery's playing music. And I'm real emotionally connected to music. So I have to be careful what I listen to, because it'll take me whatever direction the music's in.
Music is spiritual, brother, just like whiskey. It's all spirit. Like,
yeah. And so the distillery was playing all these songs, and some of them were my brother's favorite songs that are on his playlist. And then my brother's favorite song that we played at his funeral came on. And I lost it. I had to leave. I went out. They had like a little foyer area that was separated from the rest of the space. And I went out there and I was just trying to get, my emotions under control. And one of the guys that I was there with come walking out and he said, "I want to be there for you." And I thought that was nice. And he said, about a year ago, I don't know if you remember, but I called you the night after my father committed suicide.
It was him.
And you were there for me. And I want to be there for you. And, he hugged me and I held him and I cried and, we had our moment. But that's what this is about.
Agreed.
It's not about all the other stuff, and it's not about the trolls that, got held too much when they were a baby or not enough, and they want to go on and talk trash, and the people that want to get you upset and tell you they hope that you die of face cancer or whatever. It's not about all that. It's about those moments, and you never know when you're creating one. And so you just charge ahead and you do the right things, and you stay on mission, and you be clear, and you communicate who you are and what you're about as often and as loudly as possible. And you hope that everything works together so that it doesn't bankrupt you. And that's the very best that anyone can do. And all you can do is hope. But if at the end of the day, financially it doesn't work out, you weren't doing it for that reason anyway. And
very true.
And those that begrudge you, if you ever do reach any level of success, they just don't understand, and you got to forgive them and let them go. But that's, for me and for anybody that's watching this, is like, what the fuck is this guy crying about? For me, all this started whenever I lost my brother to suicide in 2014, and he was actually 82nd Airborne, which it sounds like.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I actually had this. Oh, it doesn't say 82nd, but
I got to get something to show you. This is one of three that they ended up getting a non. They couldn't any longer do this. Boundary Oak Distillery made these, and so my dad was master jumper of 82nd, and so this star is master jumper, over 100 jumps from a certain altitude. He was also a 82nd instructor in Fort Benning, but anytime I bought him something, if it had this logo and it didn't have the star, he'd make me take it back. So Boundary Oak made these, and I could never find the white one. And I'll tell you a quick story. So I bought another red. I stripped all the red wax off. I tried to dip it myself. I couldn't get it. So I called Seth Detling at Detling, a good friend of mine, right? And so I said, Seth, what would it take for you to dip this in white for me? And Seth said, dude, your dad was a badass. I'll do it for free. Like, get me the bottle. So I brought it to him and he dipped it. Well, once he dipped it, I started seeing the bottles everywhere. We go to Tennessee to Elixir. Dude, I get chills when I tell the story. So Elixir is very compact, but you're going to spend an hour in there because he's got so much good stuff to look at. But in the back, he has a small shelf, and that small shelf had a Detling bottle sitting right next to a white bottle. So this is the white bottle that I bought that day. Those kinds of things resonate with me. That meant something. But I bought these because I want to do a wall for my dad when I get the basement done and get my new bar set up. So there'll be a wall with his shadow box and this stuff on it. But I just thought these were really cool. But they did receive a cease and desist from 82nd Airborne. Some people tell me it was from Maker's Mark because the wax went too far. But I think Maker's Mark only has the right on the legs, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I called Boundary Oak because I was like, look, there's got to be a white bottle that I can get. And she's like, no, sir, I can't even talk to you about it. She said we received a cease and desist because the person that gave us the approval to make these bottles didn't have the right approvals. But anyway, I thought that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you ever need anything,
I didn't know that about your brother.
Yeah. Yeah, he
really
was 82nd, injured in jump school, passed out during a run with his rucksack and ended up with the back injury, came out with addiction to opioids and, never quite got back on track and took his life in 2014. And so, this has been kind of my healing journey and my way to give back and try and help others.
Well, it's made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and I think you just keep pressing forward, right?
It has, and I can only suspect that there's a whole lot of people that have been positively influenced by it that were embarrassed about the state that they were in that didn't reach out to me. But enough people have reached out to me that when people, try to discourage me, I go, well, you barking up the wrong tree.
Even if it had only been that one person, just that one person was worth it all, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I remember
the fact that it's been multiples. That don't stop. You can't stop.
Yeah. So that's what I'm all about. This is what this is all about, right? And that's why I kind of have a message that I share at the end of all my podcasts for anybody out there that's never seen it. And it's that I realized, being involved in the whiskey enthusiast world and seeing those people out there that were spreading hate and, are angry for whatever reason about the world, and they want to talk down to other people or try to discourage or hurt other people. I realized that if they can do that to a stranger online, that there's nothing that keeps me from doing the opposite and being encouraging and loving to a stranger online. And so I end all of my podcasts the same way. And that's by saying, if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And
that's beautiful.
Love is the most valuable thing in the world, and it's also free to give. So that's kind of the message of my podcast and why I do everything I do and why I've gone through all the struggles and why I put up with all the shit and why I've spent all the money and, all that is that I want to help spread a message of love and connection and acceptance. And that's what I'm all about. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I'm glad you came on. You're definitely making a difference, man. You've helped me. You've helped a bunch of others, and just don't keep doing it. Don't quit doing it. Keep pressing on.
I certainly will. Well, I think I probably ought to wrap it up. Is there anything else we need to cover before we jump off?
No, sir. We're good. I appreciate your time. Sorry it ran over, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I run over every time. I'm long-winded as fuck.
That's all good, brother. I appreciate you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.